The rain had been falling all afternoon, drumming steadily against the airport's tall glass windows. Inside, travelers hurried past one another, dragging suitcases, scanning boarding passes, and speaking in hurried tones over the loudspeakers' announcements. Emma moved quickly through the crowd, her boarding pass clutched tightly in her hand. This trip was something she had been saving for over a year, and she was determined not to miss her flight. But as she passed through the bustling terminal, her pace slowed. In the far corner of the waiting area, away from the constant movement, sat an elderly man. His shoulders were slightly hunched, and his hands rested on a phone he didn't seem to be using. His gaze wasn't on the screen, but somewhere far beyond it, lost in thought. People streamed past him without a second glance, as if he were invisible. Emma couldn't explain why, but there was something about him that made her stop mid-step. His eyes caught her attention. Not because they were looking at her, but because they weren't looking at anything at all. They seemed heavy, carrying a quiet sadness that was impossible to ignore. It was the kind of expression that told a story without words, a silent ache that spoke of waiting too long or losing too much. She stood there for a moment, torn between her own plans and the stranger's loneliness. The boarding announcement for her gate echoed overhead, urging her forward, yet her feet stayed rooted to the spot. Something deep inside told her she couldn't just walk away. Emma took a slow breath and stepped toward the man, her footsteps soft against the polished floor. He looked up at the sound, startled for a moment before offering a faint, polite smile. Up close, Emma could see the deep lines etched into his face, the kind that come from both age and years of carrying unspoken burdens. "Is someone coming to meet you?" she asked gently, unsure if she was intruding. The man shook his head. "No. I was supposed to be on a flight to Denver," he said, his voice low and a little shaky. "To see my daughter." He hesitated, glancing down at his phone before continuing. "But the bus I took broke down on the way here. By the time I got through security, the plane was gone." Emma could hear the quiet defeat in his words. "Can you book another one?" she asked. He sighed, shaking his head again. "Not tonight. And tomorrow might be too late." His voice cracked slightly, and his eyes glistened. "I haven't seen her in almost 5 years. She's not well. I just wanted to be there, just once more, before." His words faded, the ending left unspoken, but Emma understood. The terminal bustled around them, the sound of rolling suitcases and muffled announcements filling the air, yet in that moment, it felt strangely quiet. Emma felt her chest tighten. This wasn't just about a missed flight, it was about a moment that might never come again. And something told her she was standing in the middle of a choice she'd remember forever. Emma's boarding group was being called now, the voice over the loudspeaker urging her toward the gate. She glanced in that direction, her dream trip to Italy just steps away. Months of planning, saving, and anticipation had led to this moment. Yet her eyes drifted back to the old man, sitting with his small, worn suitcase by his side, looking as though the weight of the world had pressed him into the seat. She could feel her pulse quicken, the conflict rising inside her. Logic told her to go, this was her chance, her well-deserved adventure. But her heart whispered something else entirely. What was a vacation compared to a father's last chance to see his daughter? Before she could talk herself out of it, she reached into her bag and pulled out her ticket. Stepping closer, she held it out to him. "Here," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. He blinked, confused. I don't understand." "It's my ticket," Emma said softly. "It's for the next flight to Denver. She's waiting for you, you should go." His eyes widened, and for a moment, he just stared at her, his mouth opening and closing without words. "I can't take this," he finally whispered. "Yes, you can," she replied, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "You should." Tears gathered in his eyes as he accepted the ticket with trembling fingers. I don't know how to thank you." "You already have," Emma said, her voice catching. And with that, the decision was made. 2 days later, Emma sat by her apartment window, the soft patter of rain against the glass reminding her of that night at the airport. She had replayed the moment in her head a dozen times, the look in Mr. Howard's eyes when he realized he would see his daughter again. She hadn't told anyone about what she'd done, it felt like something meant to stay between them. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from an unknown number. Curious, she opened it. The first thing she saw was a photo, an elderly man in a hospital bed, holding the hand of a woman who looked to be in her 40s. Both were smiling, their faces lit with joy, though the hospital room behind them was dim and quiet. Beneath the photo was a short message, "This is my dad, Mr. Howard. He told me about what you did. I don't have the words, but you gave us a moment we thought we'd never have again. Thank you." Emma stared at the picture, her chest tightening. The smile on Mr. Howard's face was different from the one she'd seen at the airport, it was lighter, freer, like he'd been given back something he thought was lost forever. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the gesture sink in. She'd missed her trip, yes. But right then, looking at that photo, she knew she hadn't lost anything at all. In fact, she'd gained something far greater. A week later, Emma returned home from work to find an envelope in her mailbox. Her name was written on it in neat, careful handwriting. No return address. Inside was a folded letter and a small pressed flower, its petals delicate and slightly faded. She unfolded the paper and began to read. Dear Emma. If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer here. I passed peacefully the morning after seeing my daughter. You gave me the gift I'd been praying for, the chance to say goodbye, to hold her hand, and to let her know how much I loved her. That moment healed something in both of us. I don't know how to repay such kindness, but I hope this truth will stay with you. The smallest act of selflessness can change the end of someone's story. May your life be filled with the same grace you gave me. With gratitude. Howard. Emma sat at her kitchen table, the letter trembling in her hands. She pressed the flower between her fingers, imagining it once growing in a garden, plucked and kept as a memory. She had missed her long-awaited trip, yet as she stared out the window at the fading evening light, she realized she had journeyed somewhere far more meaningful. She hadn't just given away a plane ticket, she had given someone a final chapter filled with love instead of regret. And in that quiet moment, she knew, some goodbyes are worth more than any destination.